Welcome to Buddhism Seeds. Tonight I invite you to step into a journey that is both gentle and illuminating, where Zen stories not only relax your mind, but also quietly touch the deepest layers of your inner being. Find a truly comfortable position for yourself. Gently rest your back on the bed. Let your shoulders loosen, soften your face, and allow your breath to return to its natural rhythm, like waves touching the shore. As your body begins to settle, I will walk with you through the doorway that leads into ancient wisdom, where every connection in our lives can be seen again through the eyes of understanding. Have you ever wondered, why did this person appear at exactly that moment? Why do some people stay only briefly, yet leave marks in our hearts that never fade? Sometimes a person enters our life not to remain forever, but only to bring a lesson, a turning point, or an awakening. Conditions of life do not follow our preferences. They unfold in ways that allow consciousness to grow. The Buddha once taught all that exists will eventually change. When your heart learns to accept this peace, will naturally be present. This teaching is not only about impermanence, it is also a reminder that every connection in life, whether short or long, has its own season, its own role, and its precise timing. No one arrives too early. No one leaves too late. The question is, can you see the gift hidden within that encounter? Tonight, through each story, I will walk with you to look again at the connections you have known, not to regret them, but to understand. Not to cling to them, but to be grateful and to let go. The story begins on a scorching afternoon in a small riverside village where the dry season had lasted too long, leaving the land cracked like the parched skin of farmers. Gusts of wind raised red dust along the road to Rajagaha, a road where no one expected anything good to pass. But that day, something unusual happened. Beneath the shade of an ancient sala tree, a man was sitting. No banners, no trumpets, only his silent presence like a still pond in the desert of the mind. That man was the Buddha. Villagers began to gather. No one called for them yet. No one wished to leave. The silence surrounding him did not make them feel empty. On the contrary, it made them feel heard even before they spoke a word. From a distance, a frail figure stumbled closer. His name was Chandaka. Wearing torn clothes hair unkempt, his bony hands clutching his empty stomach as if to hold on to his last drop of strength. His eyes were not angry, but they were the eyes of one who had walked too long in darkness until he no longer believed in light. He knelt down. His dry voice broke out in harsh fragments. I have nothing. Only hunger, despair, and endless days repeating themselves. You speak of happiness, of peace, but why do I feel none of it belongs to me? Does someone like me even deserve to live? The air seemed to thicken. The villagers held their breath. No one laughed. No one thought his question arrogant, because deep inside each of them had once wanted to ask the same. Chandaka did not come to beg for food. He came to beg for a reason not to give up. He came to know in this life with all its pain and emptiness, is there still something worth holding on to? And the Buddha, as always, did not rush to answer. He only looked deeply into Chandaka's eyes, where resentment wrestled with hope. His gaze lingered as if piercing through layers of scarred wounds, touching the part of him that still longed to heal. The answer he was about to give was not a sermon. it was a seed, and if Chandaka was willing to keep it, that seed could bloom even in the most barren soil. The Buddha did not answer right away. He simply looked at the kneeling man with compassionate eyes free of judgment, then gently asked, "So what do you still have?" The question was light as a breeze, yet heavy as a boulder. For a moment, Chandaka froze as if time itself stopped. His hollow eyes flickered with doubt. He was used to being chased away, used to pitiful or contemptuous stares, used to empty words of comfort. But now the Buddha's question felt like a mirror placed directly before his soul. For an instant, Chandaka thought the Buddha was mocking him. "I have nothing." He had just said so. And yet the Buddha asked, "What do you still have?" But the Buddha's gaze carried no trace of scorn or ridicule. There was no judgment, no forced pity, only a complete, serene presence, like a still lake. And it was that presence which forced Chandaka to look within himself, honestly, without evasion. He lowered his head. His chest rose and fell. The wind from the nearby river carried the smell of cracked earth, the ashes of poor kitchens, the yearning of a human life. Chandaka sat there in silence, as if searching in the darkness within. Then slowly, words emerged from the depths of memory. "I still have eyes to see the sky, legs to walk on the earth, and breath still here with me." The words seemed simple, yet their echo startled even Chandaka himself. Until now, he had only counted what he lacked: shelter, food, status, love. Never had he paused to count what remained. He touched his chest, realizing for the first time that his breath was moving in and out. Something ordinary, yet in truth, the most precious thing he had. The Buddha smiled, a smile that did not congratulate or judge. Just like morning light falling on the river's surface. Then you have more than the blind who cannot see light. You have more than the crippled who cannot walk on their own. And you have more than those dying each moment unable to feel a single breath. His voice was not loud, but in the silence surrounding them, each word was like a drop of water falling into Chandaka's heart, rippling outward into circles of awareness. He felt as if sweet water was seeping into the dry soil of his spirit. The Buddha turned to the villagers seated around him. Every face, from elders to children, listened not with their ears but with their hearts. The one who knows enough is the richest of all. The one who is full within cannot have their inner light dimmed by the outside world. A young disciple, his face bright but still carrying questions, joined his palms and asked, "Lord, how can one know what enough truly is, since everyone has different desires?" The Buddha looked at the river sparkling with sunlight. "When you drink water from this river, when do you stop? When my thirst is quenched." Exactly. Knowing enough does not mean abandoning everything. It means knowing when to stop. True satisfaction is not about how much you have, but about ending craving at the right time. He paused, then looked back at Chandaka. Chandaka thought he was poor because he counted what he did not have. But once he began counting what remained, his heart changed. And it is that heart which creates lasting happiness. The space softened. The river breeze turned cooler. Birds chirped more clearly in the solitary. Chandaka wept, not the tears of suffering, but the tears of someone realizing for the first time he had never been abandoned by life. For the first time, he did not see himself as a wretch, but as a being still full of possibility. He bowed deeply. I still have eyes, legs, and a mind to understand this. I thank you." His words rose like a vow. The villagers who witnessed the moment said nothing, but many saw themselves reflected in Chandaka. They too had counted their lacks, forgetting what they already had. From that day on, Chandaka no longer begged. He asked to remain in the village, not to do grand things, but simple ones, sweeping the temple each morning, carrying water for the elderly, cooking porridge for the sick. Every task he did he saw as a privilege, not because it brought money, but because each act confirmed he still had value. The villagers began to see him differently, not as a pitiful beggar, but as someone transforming, blossoming with a new quality, the quality of one who has found inner wealth, even while owning nothing outside. Chandaka did not instantly become a hermit or saint, but each morning when sunlight touched the dusty road, he smiled, placed a hand on his chest, and remembered his breath. He knew that his true wealth was not in a bowl of rice, but in the awareness planted that day, when the Buddha gave him not food, but a new way of seeing himself. The story of Chandaka spread across the region. No one remembered exactly the words the Buddha spoke, but everyone remembered the image of a beggar weeping in silence, and the Buddha's gentle eyes when he asked, "What do you still have?" From then on, in that small riverside village, whenever someone complained of having nothing, others would softly remind, "What do you still have?" as if it were a mantra. And so a simple question became a seed of awakening, not only for Chandaka, but for all who witnessed it. In today's life, you may not lack food or clothing. You may live in a house with a roof, travel in comfort, eat meals with many flavors, use smartphones, work with modern computers, and enjoy the conveniences of this age. But do you feel enough? Have you ever truly sat still in silence to realize how deeply you are indebted to life itself? Or are you still busy counting what you do not yet have? A bigger house, a more prestigious job, a more perfect body, a flawless love, only to let that counting rob you of what is already precious. Human beings have a dangerous habit, focusing too much on the missing part of life, like looking at a great painting, but staring only at a tiny stain, then declaring the whole canvas ruined. And the more we focus on what is lacking, the more we forget what is whole. We begin to feel poor, not because we truly lack, but because we no longer see. The story of Chandaka is a simple but essential reminder to see what you already have is the first step out of suffering. He did not need to be given anything more. He only needed to open his eyes to himself, to realize he already had eyes, legs, breath, and awareness, enough to live a meaningful life. And when you begin to see what you have, you stop scrambling to seize what others hold. You stop comparing your life to someone's on social media. You stop craving what exists only in imagination, because you realize fullness does not come from the outside. It does not lie in mansions, titles, or bank accounts. It lies in your ability to pause, breathe, and be grateful for what is present now. Whatever your circumstances, rich or poor, smooth or uncertain, if your heart can stop and see the value already here, then you have begun to live as a truly wealthy person. Because in the end, happiness is not a destination. It is a capacity. And that capacity begins the moment you learn to see what you already have. Like a lotus blooming in the mud, Its fragrance does not come from where it grows, but from its very essence. Some people appear in our lives at just the moment that seems random. Some words that seem like care turn out to be interference. Some actions that seem like love make others feel weak, helpless, stripped of dignity. One day during a tea meditation under the temple veranda, a young disciple named Takashi asked the Zen master, "Master, I once helped others with all my heart, but then the relationship broke apart. Was it wrong to help, or did I help in the wrong way?" That question, which seemed to be about a small matter in daily life, opened up a very deep layer of Buddhist teaching that helping others also requires wisdom. Kindness does not always bring good results. There are moments in life when we believe helping is the right thing to do. We think if we just reach out a hand, if we just intervene a little, we can save someone from pain, from failure, from storms. Yet sometimes that very kindness becomes an intrusion, and we do not realize in the hurried embrace of compassion, we may steal another's chance to grow on their own feet. The story of Shun and Masu began like any bond of friendship that seemed unbreakable. They had been friends since childhood, growing up together in a fishing village by the sea. Masu was strong, straightforward, and sincere. Shun was calm, thoughtful, and reflective. One like the waves, the other like the shore, complementing each other through all their youth. But in life, everyone eventually reaches a crossroads. Masu inherited his father's trade as a boat builder. His hands became rough over years of sawing and chiseling, but his eyes still held the brightness of one who knew the value of labor. Shun, receiving a full education, left the village for the city and became an official. Though their paths diverged, they kept in touch. Their friendship seemed everlasting. Until one day, a great storm swept through the village. The boat Masu had labored on for half a year split in two. All the remaining wood was ruined. With no money and no materials, Masu faced the risk of abandoning his trade. The news reached Shun, and as anyone who cares deeply for a friend might do, he quietly acted, sending money to the village carpenter with instructions to provide Masu enough wood, but never reveal who sent it. The boat construction continued. Masu sighed with relief, unaware that his silent pride was being wounded from the shadows, until the truth was revealed. Masu learned it was Shun who had helped. He did not explode in anger, but when they met by the seashore, his eyes carried more pain than any reproach. "I would rather start again, even if it takes a year, as long as it is by my own strength. Silent pity to me is an insult." Shun was unsettled. "I didn't mean to insult you. I only thought I have more and you were struggling. I didn't want to see you fail." Masu shook his head, his gaze calm but firm. "But failure is not always bad. It is part of the journey. Overcoming it with my own hands is what makes me feel alive." In another corner of that scene, a young student named Takashi was silently watching. His face was torn between understanding and remorse, for he had once done the same to his younger sister. When she failed, he did everything to save her, with money, advice, even interfering in her relationships. But the more he did, the more she withdrew. She no longer believed she could walk on her own, like a tree sheltered for too long, no longer knowing how to withstand the wind. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha once said, "No one saves us but ourselves. No one can, and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path." Compassion without wisdom easily becomes a form of control, and control, even when wrapped in the name of love, is still imposition. A hand that pulls someone climbing a mountain may cause them to fall for losing their foothold. An umbrella blocking sunlight may weaken a sapling. A piece of advice, however well-meaning, may prevent someone from hearing the voice within. Helping others, it turns out, is an art, and that art is not always action. Sometimes helping is stepping back. Sometimes love is standing still. Sometimes presence is enough. After that dialogue, Takashi understood. He no longer rushed to intervene in others' journeys. He learned to listen without fixing, to wait without pushing, to trust without imposing outcomes. Gradually, his sister began to stand up again. Not because he did things for her, but because he finally stopped doing them. The silent presence of someone who understands the right timing can be the gentle cradle that supports a soul, just learning to find itself again. The lesson from Shun and Masu is not to blame anyone. It simply reminds us some pains we wish to remove are not ours to resolve. Some struggles belong to the person themselves, and if you truly love, you will learn patience. Patience not to be the hero. Patience not to save. Patience not to satisfy the ego's desire to do the right thing. Because sometimes the right thing is to step aside and let them walk through suffering in their own way. Not interfering does not mean being indifferent. It means respecting another soul's inner journey. Just as the lotus cannot bloom in place of another lotus, only when each seed breaks through the mud by itself does its fragrance truly belong to it. The story does not end with an embrace or an apology, but it opens a new space where friendship no longer carries the burden of giving and receiving, but becomes a place of simply being with without possessing, being with without controlling, being with without always having to do something. And perhaps that very being with is the deepest love you can offer another. As Takashi left the temple that day, a gentle breeze swept through the Zen garden. His figure faded under the trees, leaving behind a stillness that lingered in my heart. No long sermon, no rigid teaching, just one timely story. And he stepped across an important threshold on his own. And sometimes, that is the most precious thing people learn, not because they are forced, but because the time has come for them to awaken. Before we continue, pause for a moment to ask yourself in your own life, have you ever hurt someone by trying to help? Not out of malice, but because you lacked the patience to let them grow, or because you did not yet understand that helping the right way at the right time is more important than helping right away. Love is not only about giving, but also about knowing when to stand still, knowing when to step back, so the other has the chance to discover their own strength. Because if you keep pulling them up every time they stumble, how will they learn to rise? If you keep fixing their life, how will they know how to live it themselves? There are lessons that only reveal themselves when a person fully experiences failure. And some people only truly grow when there is no one left to rescue them. That is not abandonment, but a form of mature love, a love that steps back so the other can grow. And perhaps that too is what life once wanted to teach you. A spring breeze softly slipped through the leaves, carrying the scent of fresh earth and the murmuring of a brook threading its way at the foot of the mountain. Hidden among the quiet pines, a small Zen monastery appeared, as if it had been there for centuries. In that simple courtyard, a young woman named Alina sat silently on an old stone step. Her face turned toward a sky of gray-blue mottled with white clouds, her distant gaze searching for something she had long felt but never named. Alina was not an unhappy person. She lacked nothing materially, her dreams had not been broken, and she bore no great wounds. Yet inside her lived a very private emptiness, quiet and hard to express. She was kind, calm, and sincere. And yet for many years Alina carried a quiet shame that she had too few friends. She did not belong to lively groups, was not often invited on outings, and was not part of loud conversations. At times, she asked herself, "Am I too boring? Is there something about me that makes others not want to come close?" That doubt grew seeping into her daily life. Each time she went on social media and saw photos of gatherings and messages filled with emojis, her heart tightened. The feeling of being left behind by the world. Loneliness, not because no one loved her, but because she felt she didn't belong anywhere. One afternoon, as the spring wind turned crisp, Alina stepped into the small tea room where Zen Master Kobo often received visitors. She put her palms together and bowed. "Master, I don't have many friends. I live gently and harm no one yet. No one is truly close to me. Is there something wrong with me?" Zen Master Kobo was a man in his 70s with a beard white as mist and eyes always warm like the early morning sun. He did not rush to answer. He calmly poured 2 cups of tea, one set before Alina, one for himself. Then he asked, "How do you find the tea in this cup?" Alina lifted it and took a sip. The tea's gentle, delicate fragrance spread across her palate, leaving a deep, sweet aftertaste. "The tea is very pleasant, refined, and it makes me feel at peace." Kobo smiled. "That is also what a true friend is. No need to be dazzling, no need to be many. Just 1 cup like this, enough to nourish an afternoon. But people today often chase after hundreds of different cups, drinking in haste, and then remain thirsty." He pointed out the window to an ancient pine standing silently in the courtyard. "Do you see that pine? It grows more slowly than grass or wildflowers, but once mature, it survives countless seasons of snow and wind. True friendship is like that, not flashy, not quick to bloom, but once it takes root, it becomes a refuge for the soul." Alina sat quietly. The master's words felt like cool water flowing through the cracks of her heart. She suddenly remembered an old friend from college days. They didn't text often or post photos online, yet each meeting brought her calm. Few words, simple presence. Kobo looked at her and gently asked, "Do you have such a friend?" Alina nodded, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Yes, someone I seldom see, but who always listens to me sincerely. Then you already have a treasure. Don't think you're lacking just because others have many friends. They may simply be drinking a great many cups of weak tea." The master set his hand on the table, his voice deepening. The Buddha once taught, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." Friendship is the same. One friendship that nourishes the soul is worth more than 100 relationships that merely fill a void. He paused, then continued, "People today fear, loneliness, and seek the crowd. But the most frightening thing is this: standing in the midst of a crowd and still feeling lost. That is the deepest loneliness." Kobo turned to the blooming garden. Let friendship come like a lotus, slow to grow but long to fragrance. One blossom is enough to scent an entire space. He ended with another teaching of the Buddha. Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. Peace comes from within. Do not go searching for it outside. That day when Alina left the monastery, her steps felt lighter and her heart gentler. The sky was still gray, the wind still a little cold, but she no longer felt lacking. She understood that not everyone surrounded by many people is happy. And sometimes a quiet friend is the most precious gift life gives to those calm enough to recognize it. After that day, Alina gradually changed her view. She stopped seeking validation through the number of friends. Long afternoons in her bedroom were no longer empty silence, but became space to listen to herself. Each morning, she still made tea as before, but no longer to fill a void, rather as a ritual to connect with life and with her own heart. She began to tend a few true relationships, not many, but sincere. She no longer glued her eyes to social media to count interactions or compare herself with some group out there. Instead, she chose to call her one close friend, someone from college now living elsewhere, whom she met only occasionally. They didn't need many words or long accounts, but each call was unconditional listening. She felt she could be herself, not a social version, not straining to please anyone. Once in her journal, she wrote, "Perhaps having few friends is not a defect. It is a gift that helps me learn to love deeply and selectively." And indeed, some people spend a lifetime just to learn this lesson, that happiness is not in the crowd. Having many people around does not necessarily make the heart less lonely. Often, it is at the noisy party, amid bursts of laughter, that one feels most empty, because no one truly sees them. But one person, just one present with a whole heart, can melt the long simmering loneliness within. Like a small light, flickering on a cold night, not enough to illuminate the whole road, but enough to warm your hands. As time passed, Alina noticed something strange. The more at peace she was with herself, the more she drew people like herself. Not everyone understood her, but those who stayed were people who could sit with her in silence without awkwardness. They could walk for hours together in the forest, saying nothing, just listening to birds and breathing, yet still feel connected. She realized perhaps a true friend is not the one who always makes us happy, but the one who makes us peaceful. The one beside whom we don't need to perform. The one who won't leave if we are fragile or quiet. Once a new friend asked her, "Don't you fear loneliness having only a few close people?" Alina smiled. "I don't need many. I only need enough, and I have enough." The other friend fell silent. Perhaps she was still chasing social meetups and hurried relationships, like drinking many cups of weak tea in hopes of finding a deep flavor. Then on a rainy night, as wind battered the window, Alina sat again at her desk, warm yellow light falling on her thoughtful face. She wrote, "A deep friendship, a sincere word, a genuine presence, sometimes that is all I need." She remembered Zen Master Kobo's words from years before modern people fear being alone, so they seek crowds. But the truly frightening thing is not being by oneself, it is feeling empty while surrounded by many. She nodded to herself, because now she no longer felt empty. Each day was a chance to nourish her inner life, to understand herself, and to see clearly the value of simple things like a warm cup of tea a brief call, or a message from an old friend. She began to realize fullness does not come from outside. It is an inner state. And when the heart is full, everything around you takes on meaning. Even silence has a fragrance, like a lotus blooming on a still lake, not needing much, only needing to be true. And if you, the one reading these lines, have ever felt like Alina ever thought you weren't good enough, simply because you had few friends ever felt adrift in this noisy society, then perhaps it is time to pause for a moment. Be quiet and ask yourself, what do I truly need to feel at peace? Perhaps you are growing like a pine slowly but steadily. Perhaps you do not yet have many friends, but you are preparing good soil for some deep friendship to take root. And who knows, one day, when you are ready, that friend will arrive quiet as the light of late afternoon, but staying for a very long time. Because in the end, what nourishes us is not the number of people passing through our lives, but the genuine presence of the one who dares to stay. And like a brook that gently changes course deep in the forest, the next story will carry you to another moment in life where a young woman burdened with heavy mistakes seeks the Buddha. It is a story of atonement, of second chances, and of the truth that no one is beyond change. The next story takes us to another moment in life, where a young woman carrying heavy mistakes sought the Buddha. This is a journey of atonement, of second chances, and proof of the truth that no one is beyond change. After the night rain dawn had just broken, drops of water clung to bamboo leaves reflecting the morning sun like thousands of tiny, sparkling jewels. The grounds around Jetavana Monastery seemed cleansed by the night rain and awakened by the light of daybreak. On the damp, earthen path, still marked by deer tracks, a small figure walked toward the monastery gate. Her name was Maya. She looked thin, her steps slow, as if treading on the weight of her own memories. Her long hair was tied hastily, her faded gray cloak hung loosely, her tired eyes holding within them a fragile, trembling hope. No one in the monastery knew who she was, but the gatekeeper, seeing her eyes, asked no questions. He simply opened the gate in silence. Maya was brought before the Buddha in a simple space where he often received those with unspoken suffering. She did not fall to her knees, did not beg, did not plead. She only bowed deeply and said, I have not come to ask for forgiveness. I only want to ask, can I still begin my life again? The Buddha gazed at her for a long time. Then he pointed to the lotus pond in front of the hall. Do you see that lotus? It rises from the mud, yet the mud has never stained it. Maya was silent, then suddenly wept. Her tears did not flow from judgment, but because for the first time she felt seen as a human being, not as a mistake. She stayed, not as a disciple, but as someone learning how to live again. Her first task was sweeping leaves in the courtyard. Each morning, while dew still clung to the grass, she carried her bamboo broom along the stone paths, moving quietly like a shadow. She never looked anyone in the eyes. Whenever someone passed by, she quickly lowered her head to avoid their gaze. One morning, a novice named Kavi asked, "Why do you always bow your head? No one here will scold you." Maya gave a sad smile. "Because I used to fear the eyes of others." Kavi replied gently, "But here people only look at each other with kindness." That simple remark was like a drop of water falling into Maya's heart. It stirred something she had forgotten, that not every place in the world was filled with judgment. Day by day, Maya continued her tasks, brewing tea for the monks, folding blankets in the meditation hall, gathering firewood for the kitchen, watering vegetables in the garden. Each small act was a step back to herself. No one asked her about her past. No one pitied her. And it was that very ordinariness that slowly helped her release the self-condemnation within. One evening, Maya sat by the lotus pond as sunset dyed the water red. The Buddha came and sat beside her, saying nothing for a long while. Then he asked, "Do you still think about your past mistakes?" Maya bowed her head. "Yes, every day. I cannot forget." The Buddha nodded slightly. "You don't need to forget, but do not let the past control you. Forgiveness does not begin with others. Forgiveness is when you look at yourself without contempt." He continued, "Mud cannot taint the lotus if the lotus knows it is a lotus. So too with your mind. It may have been stained, but its essence is never lost. Awakening is knowing clearly you have shadows, but you also have light." For the first time, Maya understood. Atonement is not punishment, it is returning. Returning to the pure part of herself, long forgotten in the midst of her mistakes. Maya did not speak much, but gradually everyone noticed her presence brought a strange sense of peace. When she set down a cup of tea, it was not just water, it carried a quiet warmth. When she helped fold someone's blanket, her gentle movements felt as if she were caring for a part of their soul. One day, a visitor asked a young monk, "Who is that woman? Why does she seem as calm as a lake after rain?" The monk replied, "She is someone who once drifted, but instead of sinking, she learned to swim back with gratitude and stillness." From then on, Maya was no longer the woman who had sinned. She became the monastery's garden keeper. She did not preach, she did not lecture, yet anyone near her felt as though dust had been gently brushed from their hearts. One day, young Kavi asked her, "Do you feel you have forgiven yourself?" Maya smiled. "I don't know, but each morning when I wake, I no longer hate myself. And I think that is enough." Many years later, when people spoke of Maya, they no longer mentioned her old mistakes. They spoke of her as a lotus blooming late but radiantly. She needed no one to certify her as redeemed. Her way of life, quiet, kind, complete, was the most powerful testimony. Once a newcomer to the monastery, weighed down by guilt from the past, asked Maya, "How will I know if I deserve forgiveness?" Maya simply said, "When you stop demanding forgiveness and begin to live as though you have already been given a second chance." A lotus bud does not need anyone's reminder to bloom. It only needs enough light, enough patience, and a faith as thin as sunlight that it is not the mud. The monastery gate remains open. Those carrying pain still come, and the journey of healing, atonement, and awakening still continues. On a chilly early morning in an ancient Indian forest, when the dew still clung quietly to the branches, as if unwilling to leave, the whole forest seemed to hold its breath. No birdsong, no wind. The space felt held by an invisible sacred energy, where every leaf was meditating, every branch resting in silence. Suddenly, the sound of an arrow slicing the air rang out cold and decisive. It was not merely metal-piercing space, it was the echo of a heart in turmoil. Then from afar, a man appeared, tall, strong, his heavy steps crunching dry twigs underfoot, eyes blazing red, both hands still stained with blood. This was Kasyapa, the famed hunter of the region renowned for his unfailing archery, the man the whole village saw as a hero because he protected them from wild beasts. But that morning, he himself was the one being pursued, not by any beast, but by the call within his own heart. Kashyapa was chasing a wounded deer. It had fled into a forbidden part of the forest, a place said to be sacred where ascetics were practicing. As he stepped into that forest intending to end the animal's suffering, a scene stopped him in his tracks. Beneath an ancient sala tree sat a man in an earth-colored robe, motionless, unlike anyone he had ever seen. A face as still as a windless lake, eyes half closed, yet seeming to see into the depths of another's mind. No greeting, no introduction. Still panting, Kasyapa shouted, "Did you see a deer pass by here? It's wounded. I must end it so it won't suffer." The ascetic did not answer at once. He slowly opened his eyes, his gaze unwavering without a trace of judgment. Those eyes were like a mirror reflecting every corner of Kasyapa's mind. He asked in a voice like water dripping on stone, "Do you think you're ending suffering, or extending it with another arrow?" One question. But it was not light. It was like a reversed arrow piercing the thick hide of reasons, habits, and beliefs Kasyapa had carried all his life. He suddenly felt uneasy. Anger rose. Yet the words that came out were full of confusion. "I make my living by hunting. It's the only way I know. If I don't end its pain, wouldn't I be letting it suffer longer?" The ascetic who was the Buddha did not condemn him. He simply looked on and said, "No one is born to kill, but people live with killing for so long that they mistake it for their nature." He gestured toward the forest. "The deer bears more than a wound. It carries fear. You say you want to end pain, but your arrow has already made that fear grow larger." Kashyapa fell silent. Suddenly, what he had believed began to waver. All his life, he'd been taught a skilled hunter ends an animal's life quickly, so it does not suffer long. But no one had ever asked him, who truly needs saving? For a moment, he felt everything stop. The wind, the birds, even his heartbeat. The Buddha invited him to sit. There was no seat, only a patch of bare earth beneath the tree. Yet in that moment, it felt like a refuge for a weary soul. He did not preach. He did not recite scripture. He simply inhaled and exhaled, a steady, slow rhythm as if inviting Kasyapa to return to himself. Then in a whisper he said, "There is no blood that leaves no trace in the killer's heart, and there is no compassion that is meaningless, even when offered to one who has done harm." It was as if Kasyapa had been awakened. He looked down at his hands, the hands that had held a bow and loosed countless arrows. Those hands were now trembling, not from cold, but because for the first time he felt the true weight of one arrow. He had never considered that the wounds on an animal's body might also leave scars in the shooter's mind. The cries of pain, the fearful eyes, all of it had seeped into him bit by bit like a slow poison. The Buddha did not tell him to forgive himself. He simply showed him the suffering he carried was the consequence of what he had done. He asked, "When you kill, is your heart at peace?" Kashyapa lowered his head, his voice small. "No, never." The Buddha nodded, as if affirming an obvious truth. "Then are you killing pain, or killing your own peace?" This time the question was no longer philosophy. It was a real tear in Kasyapa's heart. He could no longer speak. He just sat there in silence, thick as mist, letting one final arrow, not from a bow, but from wisdom, enter his heart and do the opposite, not kill, but awaken. From that moment, Kasyapa was no longer the same. He did not throw away his bow, but he learned to let his hands feel. He did not abandon the mountains and forests, but he began to walk without leaving blood behind, and that story is still told as proof of what the Buddha once taught. No one can heal through violence. No one can save by sowing more fear. Sometimes, a timely question can awaken a lost soul. And sometimes, light does not descend from the sky, but comes from a gaze without judgment, a word light as a breeze yet heavier than any dogma. This is not a story of a villain being reformed. It is not about guilt and atonement in a dramatic sense. It is a story about us, those who live on the thin line between good intentions and habitual actions. We think we are saving, but sometimes we are controlling. We think we are loving, but in truth, we are imposing. And at times we must touch a very quiet moment like Kashyapa did to understand that compassion is not an action, but an awakening. Kashyapa is not a symbol of a bad man. He is the image of a person living what he was taught is right. Protect the village end. Suffering, do not let weakness linger. He learned archery as a child. No one told him that suffering can be listened to instead of eliminated. The teaching in this story does not lie in a sermon. It lies in silence. When the Buddha invited Kashyapa to sit, he did not say, "You must stop." He did not lecture on precepts, did not chart out karma, did not threaten or entice. He simply sat there present like a still lake. In that presence, Kashyapa saw the blood in his own heart. That was a wordless teaching. And precisely in that non-coercion, an arrow within Kashyapa began to fall. Imagine this a person raised in a world where strength is admired and gentleness is deemed weakness. Such a person, when faced with suffering his own or another's, will react with action, fix, control, cut off. It is how he learned to survive. No one taught him to sit still and listen. No one told him that some wounds need not be saved, only witnessed. And perhaps you have been like that too. Perhaps you have said, "I did it for their own good." But the question is, are you truly helping or loosing another arrow? Perhaps you tried to correct your child, rescue a relative from mistakes, change someone out of love. But maybe what they needed was to be seen, not to be saved. The Buddha did not argue right and wrong. He did not try to change Kasyapa's beliefs. He simply held up a mirror. And the miracle happens when, for the first time, a person sees himself not through judgment, not through society's lens, but through a quiet, compassionate gaze. Kashyapa wept, not from fear or remorse, but because he realized he had never been seen as a human being in pain. I want you to pause here for a moment. Recall someone in your life you once thought was wrong, perhaps a stubborn child, a headstrong partner, perhaps yourself, and ask, have I seen them as someone needing to be heard, or merely as a problem to fix? When Kashyapa lowered his bow, the deer in the forest was still trembling, but the noise had softened. Because the air had changed. No one shouted. No one raged. There was only presence, and that very presence is the strongest sedative for invisible wounds. You might ask, can something so simple change a person's whole life? Yes, because deep change does not come from threats, but from insight. And insight does not come from lectures, but from experience. compassion does not begin with forgiving others. It begins with seeing the suffering within yourself. This is not just a beautiful line. It is a compass for anyone on the healing path. For when we do not recognize that we too are hurting, we will easily hurt others in the name of love. A father once said, "I just want my child to be strong, not bullied like I was." And so he made the child study non-stop, forced sports, forbade tears. The child grew up afraid of his own father, though the father always said, "I love you." Do you see? That is another arrow. And often that arrow is wrapped in what we call love. There is no act of killing that leaves no trace in the heart. Killing here is not only taking a life. Every time we scold, insult, force, or wound another, we also create a mark in the heart. And like physical wounds, if left untreated, it festers and decays what is good within us: trust, gentleness, the capacity to love. And perhaps the saddest thing is not hurting others, but numbing our own heart. No compassion is meaningless even when offered to one who has done harm. This does not mean you must forgive everything, but it states something vital. Compassion does not depend on the recipient. It depends on the giver's maturity. When you look at others with compassion, you are not bestowing favor. You are freeing yourself from the shackles of hatred and judgment. Just as the Buddha looked at Kashyapa, not with condemnation, but as one would look at a person lost in the forest, trying to find his way. And you can become that gaze for yourself and for others. Imagine every action of yours is an arrow. Some arrows you shoot out of fear, some from old wounds unhealed. Some you think are saving, but are really forcing others into your wishes. If you are holding a bow, perhaps criticism, disappointment, coercion, try setting it down. You need not become an enlightened one. Just learn how to breathe without shooting. And if there is someone in your life you think does not deserve love, perhaps that is the person who needs to be seen most of all. Like Kashyapa, he did not need to be forgiven. He needed presence. He did not need to be instructed. He needed to know he too was human, learning how to be human. Sometime later, Kashyapa asked to be ordained, not because he was moved by doctrine, but because he had been given a space safe enough to truly see himself. And he wished to spend the rest of his life relearning how to breathe, not to kill, but to live. In life, you may be killing the tender shoots of your own emotions through controlled judgment and the rejection of your own softness. Try returning to your breath. Right now. You don't need to understand all the teachings. Just breathe as someone learning to live for the first time. And if you can do that, you have begun to walk the path Kashyapa once walked, not from darkness to light, but from reaction to awareness. If you see yourself in this story, don't rush to overhaul your life. Simply pause. Look at the bow you are holding. Perhaps an angry glare, a sharp word, a controlling act. Then set it down gently, because you do not need another arrow. And when you are ready, we will step into the next story together. The story of the Buddha and the courtesan Sundari. No one is outside the circle of light. That is where light touches not only blood, but the darkest corners of society, so you may see no one, not even you, is excluded from that circle of light. That afternoon in the monastery grounds, carpeted with gently falling sala blossoms, a young lay practitioner quietly followed behind the old Zen master. Beneath the ancient trees, the air seemed to thicken with unspoken concerns. He hesitantly asked, "Master, is it possible that people hate the light simply because it exposes the darkness within them?" The master stopped. That question was not just the words of a young man. It was the echo of countless souls who had been hurt not because of their own faults, but because their authentic presence made others feel unsafe. Is it possible that the accusations you receive are not because you are wrong, but because people fear the light in you? When truth doesn't need to shout, yet makes surrounding illusions tremble. Those who live by delusion will try to extinguish that light before they themselves must face who they are. And the master told him an old story, one that is never old to those who have been misunderstood. When the Buddha was in Rajagaha, his renown spread far and wide. Each day, hundreds from all walks of life came to learn the Dharma. Some sought wisdom, some sought liberation, some came out of faith. But there were also those who came only to destroy. A faction of ascetics, losing their influence, began to fear. They could not openly oppose the Buddha, with reasoning, for his words were like clear spring water, like a bright mirror. So they chose another way attack his reputation. And they chose a person for the scheme, Sundari, a courtesan famed for her beauty and sweet speech. They hired her, telling her to appear near the monastery, often pretending to be the Buddha's secret lover. After some time, witnesses would claim they had seen her coming and going from his quarters. The script was staged like a play, waiting only for the curtain to drop. Sundari, though a courtesan, was still a human being whose heart had once longed to see the light. In the days she spent near the monastery, she often saw the Buddha meditating in the garden, compassion in his eyes, silent yet steadfast. Conflicts without a name stirred within her, but money and pressure pushed her to continue the role. Until one day when Sundari's body was found under a tree near the path into the forest. Rumors spread. The Buddha killed her to silence her. Outrage surged quickly. Those who had doubted now had a reason to criticize. Crowds rushed to the monastery, angrily demanding that he speak. But the Buddha sat there as if unaware of what had happened. Someone shouted, "You must say something. She used to come here. Everyone saw it." The Buddha raised his head, his gaze without anger, fear, or sorrow. He simply said, "Whether a saintly person or a sinner dies, the wind still blows. Leaves still fall, and the truth sooner or later will be revealed." Those words were like cool water, yet they did not soothe the anger of the crowd. They wanted a defense, a heated quarrel, a culprit, yet what they received was silence. Day after day, the rumors continued. Some said he had ordered others to kill her. Some said Sundari was pregnant. Some spun colorful tales. Meanwhile, the monastery lights still shone each night, welcoming seekers, as if nothing had happened. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha once said, "As a solid rock is not shaken by the wind, so the wise are not moved by praise or blame." That is not only a teaching, it is a compass for those who have been misunderstood, judged, or dragged into the whirlwind of slander. Have you ever felt that way? When everything you've lived and offered is dismissed by a single sentence? When just one suspicious glance or a malicious rumor is enough to make you want to withdraw from the world? Here is a truth. Few tell you those who live authentically are not always understood correctly, and those who are understood correctly do not necessarily live authentically, not because they are unworthy, but because people often fear what they do not understand. They fear difference. They fear light if that light shines too brightly into their own dark corners. The wise are not those who avoid gossip. They are those who do not let gossip govern their inner life. For those who know who they are do not need to shout to be believed. They do not need to justify themselves nor fight every suspicious look. They know that reputation is a shadow while truth is the root, and sooner or later the shadow returns to its root. In storms of rumor, if you react and shout to make others understand you, you may only be fanning the flames of slander. But if you can stand still steady like a mountain, then no matter how strong the wind, it will only pass by. That day they framed the Buddha. They staged the death of a courtesan named Sundari, then blamed his disciples. Everyone was shocked, not because they truly believed the Buddha capable of evil, but because rumor is stronger than reason, and people are easily swayed when the truth is not yet clear. But what is worth remembering is not the rumor. It is the Buddha's attitude in the face of it. He did not rush to correct it nor respond with anger. He simply said, "They have not yet seen the light, but they have the capacity to see. As for us, do not let our light go out, because someone else is still blind." A gentle sentence, yet profoundly deep. As if he were reminding us truth does not need to scream. And compassion is not weakness. It is the most steadfast strength amid storms. If you have ever been so misunderstood that you wanted to give up everything, pause, breathe slowly, and ask your heart a simple question. Does the light within me still remain? If it does, keep it one more day. Because perhaps just one day more, the truth will speak for you. You don't need to force the mist to clear. Just keep the flame alive within. When the sun rises, the mist will vanish on its own. And if tomorrow the mist has not yet lifted, keep it for one more day, because perhaps your light is not only for you. Perhaps it is exactly what others will need to find their way when lost in their own darkness. A few weeks later in that story, one of the opposing faction could no longer bear his guilty conscience. He confessed the entire plot. Sundari had been killed to stage a frame-up. The truth came to light. The whole city was stunned. But what shocked them even more was that the Buddha did not blame anyone. He did not say, "I told you so." He simply looked at those who had slandered and turned away and said, "I hope light will come to you just as light once came to me." His compassion was not about forgiving because the other was worthy. It was because he refused to let anger bind his heart. To forgive is to free oneself from hatred. That afternoon, after finishing the story, the Zen master sat quietly looking at the lay student before him. No further teaching, no further questions. But in the young man's eyes, the master saw something had changed. No more entanglement, no more thrashing and doubt. Only someone who had just stepped out of a foggy forest, slowly but knowing where he was going. Above, clouds drifted lightly. Below, the wind moved across the earth. And within the human heart, if a light is kept steady, then no matter how strong the rumors, they will pass like the wind. And now I ask you, the one listening to this story, have you ever been so misunderstood that you wanted to abandon everything? And if the light within you still remains, can you keep it for one more day? If your answer is yes, then I congratulate you, because that light one day will not only guide you, but will also save those who have lost their way both unknowingly and deliberately. Keep it one more day, just one more day, because truth in the end has a voice, and light, if patient enough, will always find its way out of the dark. Dawn had not fully broken. A thin veil of mist draped the mountainside like a cold cloth. Dewdrops clung to the young grass, glimmering with a dim light. The wind moving through the pine leaves sounded deep and long, like the earth itself sighing. The stone path up to the temple was still slick from last night's rain. At the foot of the slope, a man was walking slowly, a simple pack on his back, but his eyes heavy with unspoken thoughts. His name was Hiroshi. He had passed through many cities, many people, and even nameless affections. And then he came here, the mountain where Zen Master Hotaka lived in seclusion, not to ask for some lofty revelation, but only to ask something very human. Why do some people step into our lives and tangle our hearts like a ball of thread? He did not ask out of curiosity. He asked because he had loved, had been hurt, had wanted to hold on to someone and could not. Someone who had once been a stranger, left behind a void nothing could fill. Someone came only to cause pain, yet also awakened something he did not understand. And that lack of understanding made his heart ache. Something remained unnamed, unreleased, like a small thorn under the skin that made every touch sting. When he met Zen Master Hotaka, the first thing he said was not a greeting. It was, "I don't know why there are people who make me feel as if I've known them from a previous life, and others who, no matter how hard we try, I can never understand." Hotaka did not answer at once. He simply smiled and gestured toward the Zen garden behind the main hall. "Come into the garden. I will answer without many words." That garden wasn't like places where flowers are grown for viewing. It was not dazzling, not uniform. Each path bent sideways at angles as if shaped by streams of thought rather than a map. There were stones, trees, moss covering old wooden planks. There was even a small pond with a few leaves drifting quietly on its surface. Even in silence, the space had a voice of time, of memory, of things that had passed, but had never been lost. Hotaka stopped before a gnarled, dry trunk, its bark rough, its branches nearly bare. This tree was struck by lightning. People said it should be cut down, but I kept it. Because when I look at it, I understand endurance in silence. What has been most wounded sometimes holds the deepest life. Then he pointed to a small cluster of white flowers by the pond. These flowers have no fragrance, yet butterflies still come, because butterflies seek not only scent, but also a quiet place to land. Hiroshi fell silent. What the master said did not sound like philosophy, but like a story about him, about those who had come and gone in his life, leaving both pain and awakening. Then Hotaka bent to pick up a stone. This stone lay here for years unnoticed, but yesterday a novice picked it up and wedged it under the Buddha statue so it wouldn't tilt. Something thought useless became a foundation. He placed the stone in Hiroshi's hand. Those who come to us are the same. Some are like the tree struck by lightning, coming to test our patience. Some are like the white flowers arriving and leaving in silence, yet leaving something pure. Some are like the stone, quietly supporting us when we lean. Hiroshi looked at the stone in his hand, as if holding a piece of his own memory. He thought of the people who had hurt him. Some came, gave hope, then vanished. Some made him suffer because he could not understand them, and could not let go. But there were also those who, through days of quiet, left in him something true and soft, like a breeze across a barren desert. But why do some people make me hurt so much? Hotaka paused, his gaze far away. Because those very people, by not pleasing us, show us where in our hearts we are still clinging. They are mirrors reflecting what is not yet bright within. The mountain wind blew again, carrying the scent of pine and dampness. Hiroshi still stood there, the small stone in his hand. But now he no longer gripped it as before. He opened his hand, letting the wind carry away what did not need keeping. And perhaps from then on, he no longer asked why, because he had learned to observe not others but his own mind in relation to them, a lesson that came not from words but from a garden, a stone, and a Zen master pointing toward quiet. Hotaka turned to Hiroshi, his voice deep but light like a bell resounding in the morning mist. The Buddha once taught, "We have been father, mother, brothers and sisters to one another through countless lifetimes. Every meeting is a connection from the past." Those words echoed through space as if crossing time, and Hiroshi seemed to glimpse hazy faces flickering in a spiritual memory he had never named. Something in his heart shifted, not a clear emotion, but a vague, profound recognition. Hotaka walked slowly toward a trunk covered in lichen, each step like a pause. The one who hurts you may once have been the one you hurt. The one you want to keep may be the one you once abandoned. Every interaction, brief or deep, is a knot from ages past that needs untying. Hiroshi looked down at his hands. How many hands had he held and then released? How many embraces had once been warm and then turned cold? And how many words left unsaid had flowed past like a wordless rain from a previous life? He asked, doubt heavy in his voice. So does everyone who comes into our lives come to teach us something? Hotaka nodded, as if the question wasn't his alone, but one everyone carries, yet rarely dares to speak. Some come to give, some come to take. Some come to kindle love, some to awaken resolve. Some are the springtime of our lives. Some are winter, so we learn to keep warm from within. But no one comes and goes without leaving a mark on the heart. He paused, eyes on the pines in front of the temple, their needles trembling in the morning breeze. Then he mused, as if speaking to himself, but what matters is not why they came. It is who you became after meeting them. Those words were like a gentle yet sharp arrow. They did not pierce flesh, they went straight into the murkiest region of Hiroshi's heart, the place he had always avoided. Before he had focused only on what others had done. He forgot to look back at himself, the one who reacted, who chose to hold on or to leave. Hotaka stepped from the eaves into the main hall for a moment. When he returned, he carried 3 small objects, a smooth gray stone, a sprig of white flower just budding, and an old brass oil lamp still softly lit. He placed each item gently into Hiroshi's hands, as if setting new layers of meaning into his heart. Carry these with you. When you doubt someone in your life, ask yourself, are they a stone, a flower, or a lamp? He looked straight into Hiroshi's eyes, his words soft but deep. A stone quietly supports you when you're tilting. A flower beautifies the path, even if it doesn't stay long. A lamp lights the way in the dark, and it too will one day go out. Whatever they are, they have a reason for appearing in your life. Hiroshi lightly squeezed the 3 small items in his hands. His heart eased. Not because the pain had vanished, but because the not understanding the thing that had made him struggle and grow weary had melted like mist in the morning light. Time passed quickly, without anyone noticing. When Hiroshi rose to leave the temple, the sun had already climbed beyond the peak. The early light spread across the grass like a bright golden cloth. The air had grown warmer, but within him, something deeper than sunlight was spreading. On the path down the mountain, Hiroshi crossed a small wooden bridge over a stream. The gurgling water beneath whispered of partings never spoken. He stopped, leaned on the railing, and watched small leaves drifting downstream. They turned gently, slid along, bumped against stones, and drifted on. No two were the same, and none returned. In that moment, he remembered Zen Master Hotaka's words. Those who come to us are like leaves on a current. They may only pass by, but they cannot be meaningless. The sentence opened a door. Suddenly, Hiroshi no longer wanted to ask why someone had hurt him, why the one he wished to keep could not stay. Those questions no longer needed answers. They dissolved into a broader view, the view of karmic ties of cause and effect, of the mirror of the inner mind. Like the oil lamp in his hand, each encounter has its own light, illuminating some corner of the inner darkness we have never seen. Some arrive to show us our unhealed craving. Some arrive to remind us of compassion fallen asleep. And some simply appear to teach the greatest lesson, learning to let go without resentment, learning to hold without attachment. From then on, whenever Hiroshi met someone hard to understand, instead of reacting, he placed his hand over his pocket where he kept those 3 small objects. Then he looked at the other, as if gazing into a part of himself, perhaps a past, perhaps a future, or a hidden corner of the present he had never faced. He no longer saw others as right or wrong. He saw them as mirrors, as wind, as pieces that helped him know himself more clearly. Hiroshi no longer sought reasons to hold on to anyone. He simply recognized quietly each person is a seed sown into the soil of his heart. Some seeds will sprout, some will melt into the earth, but none are without cause. Though the story closes at the mountain's foot, it planted in Hiroshi something more important than any answer, the peace that comes from accepting the flow of karmic conditions. That afternoon, a breeze from the bamboo grove brushed across the mango garden behind the monastery. The air carried the scent of damp earth after a light rain and the fresh coolness of young leaves. The sun was sinking behind the distant mountains, the day's last light softening, laying a golden hue over the mossy stone steps that led into the meditation hall. In that quiet space, a figure in a fine silk cloak approached with heavy strides. It was King Pasenadi, the powerful ruler of a vast empire. But today, he did not bear the look of a man who commanded legions. His eyes drooped, his brow was furrowed. His gait was slower than usual, as if he carried on his shoulders something invisible, heavy as stone. He bowed very low as he sat beside the Buddha, a rare gesture of humility from a monarch. Blessed One, I have everything people dream of: a throne, treasure palaces, countless attendants. But why is it that the more I have, the more restless I become? The tighter I hold, the more I fear losing. Is there something wrong in the way I live? The Buddha did not answer immediately. He only smiled gently, then reached for a small bronze bowl placed near the lotus pond out front. He scooped up some crystal clear water and handed it to the king. Hold this bowl of water. Do not spill a drop." King Pasenadi received the bowl with both hands. At first, he held it with full concentration. His hands were steady as if guarding a precious jewel, but after only a few minutes, his arms began to ache, his shoulders to tense. The water had not spilled, but his whole body was straining in silence. The Buddha asked, "How do you feel, Blessed One?" "The longer I hold it, the more my arms ache. I know it's only a little water, but it feels like I'm lifting a boulder." The Buddha nodded. "It is not because your arms are weak. It is because what you are holding is not being set down at the right time." Silence. A light breeze moved through the lotus leaves as if nature itself agreed. King Pasenadi was stunned. After he departed, someone still remained in the meditation courtyard. It was Kema, a young monk. He had watched the meeting from afar, and questions still churned in his heart. He came to the Buddha, sat down, and bowed. "Blessed One, there is something I don't understand. Does letting go mean abandoning everything, power, responsibilities, affection, relationships?" The Buddha was quiet for a moment. He did not rush to answer. His eyes turned to the row of Bodhi trees swaying in the breeze. Then he spoke slowly, but clearly. "No, Kema. Letting go is not running away. It is not indifference, nor is it rejecting what is sacred in life. Letting go is knowing what must be kept and what must be released." He told Kema an old story. There was a man who wished to cross a great river. He had no boat, so he gathered dry grass and branches and tied them together into a raft. With it, he crossed the swift current. When he reached the far shore, instead of leaving the raft, he hoisted it onto his shoulders and continued into the deep forest. As time passed, the raft became heavy. Every step required strain, but he would not set it down, because to him the raft had once saved his life. Until one day he collapsed, not from hunger, not from beasts, but from the burden he had carried long after it was needed. Kema fell silent. The Buddha looked at him. "There are things that once helped us survive, but if we do not release them at the right time, they turn into chains." He continued, "I do not teach you to discard everything. I teach you to look what is a raft for crossing and what is a burden, what is true responsibility, and what is the illusion of a grasping mind." Kema looked down at his hands. Suddenly, he understood. He understood why the king, though having everything, was always ill at ease. Because he was carrying on his shoulders a raft named power, a raft named control, a raft named fear of loss, all formed by craving and identification. So he bowed his heart a little lighter. Kema bowed understanding. Just like King Pasenadi, he was bearing a raft called power, status, worry, responsibility, and the fears created by craving itself. There are things that tire us the more we hold them, yet they are not easy to release. Deep down, we still believe that if we don't hold on, nothing will remain. The question is that true? The Buddha's teaching has never been to flee life. On the contrary, he always taught us to live awake within life amid gain and loss, love and hate, holding and letting go. Letting go is not denial. It is clarity. It is not rejecting everything. It is choosing what to keep and what to release. The Buddha once said, "Letting go is not losing it, is ceasing to cling to what makes us lose ourselves." simple words yet a jewel of enlightened wisdom. Because not everything we hold is worth holding, and letting go does not always mean losing. There are things which only when released return us to ourselves whole and free. Remember King Pasenadi's story. When he knelt before the Buddha, he brought neither military might nor retinue. He brought a simple question we all have asked. Why is it that the more I have, the more uneasy I feel? He had power, gold and silver, a beautiful wife, good children, a strong kingdom. And yet his sleep was restless. His mind did not settle though he possessed the world. He began to doubt, am I the one who owns these things, or the one being owned? That was when the Buddha pointed to the core. The issue is not having or not having, but whether we are identifying ourselves with what we have. You may be a father, a mother, an executive, an artist, a child. All are beautiful roles until you think, if I am no longer a father, I am nothing. If I am no longer successful, I have no worth. If no one loves me, I don't deserve to live. That very thought, that identification with a role, is the chain. When we clutch something, fame, affection, the past fear, not only do our hands tire, our hearts tire. Clinging is constant effort. You cannot hold something for long without expending energy. That is why attachment breeds tension. When we demand that everything go our way, to be recognized by others, to keep someone by our side, to succeed according to plan, that control becomes a trap. And you are no longer yourself. You become a servant to the fear of loss. By contrast, when you release the notion that everything must be as I want, then even in adversity, you have freedom. Some think if letting go is good, should I abandon everything, homework, responsibilities? No. The Buddha never told King Pasenadi to give up his throne. He taught him not to let the throne sit upon his heart. So too with you. You need not quit your job, leave your partner, or discard your duties. But ask yourself, am I living from love or from fear? Am I holding from freedom or from strain? Letting go is not an outer act. It is an inner transformation. You may not be a king, but you may be clutching a kind of throne within a thing you dare not release, though it exhausts you to the core. It might be a relationship you know is no longer healthy, an image of yourself you're trying to preserve, though you are no longer that person, an expectation your parents set for you long ago carried to this day, an old wound you think you've outgrown it, yet it still aches when recalled, or simply the need to control everything, your children, your loved ones' outcomes at work, other people's emotions. Everyone has a throne not to sit on, but to defend, to fear losing, to fear breaking. But the more you hold, the farther you drift from yourself. If you can, tonight before sleep, do something very small. Place your hand on your chest, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, what can I let go of today, even just a little? You don't need to release everything at once. No one can. But you can begin with a small portion of honesty. Perhaps it's a sentence you've held in your heart unforgiven, a self-blaming thought, an image you maintain for others, though you are no longer that person. Let it go just a little, and you will feel your heart grow lighter. The next day, King Pasenadi returned to the monastery. This time he brought a bowl filled with water, just like the one the Buddha had given him the day before. But he did not strain to hold it as before. He set the bowl down before the Buddha and said, I still keep this bowl, but now I know when to set it down. The Buddha said nothing. He only smiled. His gaze was not on the king, but on a child meditating in the courtyard. The boy was very young. Rough cloth clothes, thin arms and legs, eyes half closed. Yet his face was strangely serene. On his lips was a smile, not the smile of someone who has gained something, but the smile of someone who has let something very deep go. The Buddha said to the monk beside him, "Look at that child. He has never had a throne. He has never clutched anything. So he does not need to learn how to let go. He only needs to know how to breathe." Let us continue to the next story. On a warm summer afternoon, the forest along the mountain range was so still, it was as if the wind itself were meditating. The tree canopies rustled to the earth's breathing, and sunlight filtered through the leaves into soft silk-like streaks falling on the grass. Near the forest's edge, a Buddha sat beneath a Bodhi tree body, at ease, mind unmoving, like a river that had found the sea. It was that very afternoon that a cry shattered the quiet. It was a child's cry, startled and trembling, echoing from the little dirt road that led to the village market. It was Kumaru, a boy of about 6, who had lost his mother in the crowded marketplace. Have you ever seen a child who's lost their mother? Their eyes seem to search the entire world in a single gaze. That fear, though wordless, touches the heart of anyone who sees it. Kumaru could not name his feelings. He only knew that everything around him seemed to collapse. His mother was gone. His hands were empty, and the world had become too big, too loud. We though grown, do we ever feel like Kumaru? When we lose someone, something, or even the steadiness within our own heart, we too are lost. And then we seek a refuge. But the question is, where do we take refuge when it is this very world that has led us astray? Kumaru ran along the dirt road, tears streaking his cheeks, sobs pounding in his chest. He called for his mother in vain. Passers-by glanced over, but no one stopped. The world's indifference swept across his small heart like a cold wind. At the end of the road, under the shade of an old Bodhi tree, the Buddha sat in meditation. As Kumaru drew near, it was as if he was drawn into a different kind of air, silent, wordless, yet full of presence. The Buddha did not speak. He did not ask anything. He simply opened his eyes and slowly extended a hand inviting Kumaru to sit beside him. At first, the boy kept crying. But then something strange happened. Kumaru began to hear the sounds of the space around him, the wind, the birds, and breathing. It was the steady, deep, gentle breath of the one next to him. No words of comfort, no explanations, no one questioning or embracing him. Only presence and something very real, the breath. The Buddha remained there solid as a mountain. He breathed in lightly. He breathed out deeply. Without realizing it, Kumaru began to breathe along. His tears had stopped at some point. His breath slowed. His heart no longer pounded. Fear dissolved like smoke in the afternoon sun. Kumaru's eyes gradually closed. He rested his head in the Buddha's lap and drifted into a peaceful sleep, as if returning from a storm. The breath, what we always carry, yet rarely notice, is the bridge between body and inner life. In moments of panic, fear, or agitation by the world, we often reach for outward solutions, advice helpers, reassurances. But the Buddha did none of that. He did not interfere with Kumaru's emotions. He simply became a mirror of stillness. And that was strong enough to bring a child back from panic to himself. He once taught breath is the safest refuge in all upheaval. and who returns to the breath returns to peace. Mindfulness begins with a single breath. Not deep meditation, no mantra, no need for lofty philosophy, only knowing that you are breathing and returning wholly to that rhythm. In the breath, there is life. In the breath, there is the present. In the breath, there is no past to regret and no future to fear. The wonder is this: when we pause to truly breathe, the world also pauses within us. No more clamor, no more hurried footsteps, no more scolding voices in the mind. Only life unfolding with each soft beat light as a petal. Years later, as an adult, Kumaru became a respected meditation teacher. People asked him, "From which master did you learn the way?" He simply smiled. "I began with a single breath beneath a tree." And then he told of that childhood day when, lost in the market, he was led back to himself by the Buddha, not through words, but through complete presence. Perhaps you too have been like Kumaru. Perhaps even now you are like that boy running through the marketplace of life, searching for something you cannot name. If so, please stop. Breathe in very gently. Breathe out very deeply. And know this: you are here. You are breathing. And that is enough to begin the return. Have you ever fallen into a state like Kumaru's? There are days when you are no longer an adult, but a small child racing along life's road, tears streaming, calling the name of something you just lost, yet no one hears. On such days, your heart has lost its mother. Not mother in the literal sense, but the loss of a refuge. Someone who understands you. Something that used to be a point of support. In those moments, you don't know where you're going. The world suddenly feels too wide. The people around you become strangers, and your heart is packed with fear. There is no roaring storm, just small, endless waves rising within, making you feel you are slowly sinking. In times like that, don't rush to find solutions. Don't force yourself to be strong. Do what Kumaru did unintentionally: sit down, close your eyes, and breathe. Not exalted meditation. No need to grasp all the scriptures. Just breathe, as if it were the only thing left that could save you. Let the breath bring you back. Back to the feeling of the chest rising and falling. Back to the cool air moving in and out of your nostrils. Back to the body sitting here still alive. Back to yourself in the present. You know, mindfulness is not something lofty. It is a very ordinary act, remembering that you are alive, remembering that you are breathing. Each time you return to your breath, you step out of confusion. The breath is an old friend, never gone, just waiting for you to remember. And when Kumaru awoke, his mother had arrived. They embraced in a burst of joy. But what I remember most is not the crying or the embrace. It is the boy's eyes. They no longer trembled. They were still clear. For Kumaru had traveled a short path from panic to refuge by the breath alone. And you, when life sweeps you away, when everything becomes too much, when you feel yourself drifting on a vast sea, do you remember your breath? That breath will never abandon you, from your first moment until your last. And perhaps, with just a single moment of returning to it, you will realize you were never truly lost. You only forgot the way back. And now I invite you to step into another story, where a woman named Shara learns to protect her heart from harm with wisdom and compassion. It was an early autumn morning before the sun had climbed high, with thin dew still clinging to the Bodhi leaves. a light breeze moved through the pine forest behind the monastery, making the wind chimes sound like whispers from a far-off world. In the moss-covered stone courtyard, yellow leaves fell one by one, not hurried, not noisy, simply falling, each like a feeling that had reached its time to let go. Shara sat beneath the ancient Bodhi tree, hands interlaced in her lap, eyes lowered. There were no tears, but if you looked closely, you would see in those eyes an ocean of weariness. A weariness not of the body, but of a soul that had endured too many nameless wounds. She had come after yet another painful turn, in love. Another relationship she had believed was the right one this time had fallen apart. Not with drama. One day he simply disappeared into silence. Before that, there had been words of love, midnight embraces, promises of "I won't be like the last one," and then, once again, the familiar emptiness. She whispered, as if speaking to herself, "Why am I always the one hurt in relationships?" Not far away, an old Zen master, people called him Hogi, was sweeping the courtyard. He moved slowly, almost as if his breath touched the ground. In his hands was an old bamboo broom, its wooden handle worn by the years. Shara did not expect an answer, but he stopped, looked at her for a long time with eyes that did not judge, only witnessed. "Sometimes you are not wrong for loving," he said, "but wrong for not recognizing who is bringing poison into your heart." Just one sentence, but it opened a door Shara had never dared to push. She had read all the advice like love yourself, set boundaries, don't give anyone the power to hurt you, but they were only words until now. In the days that followed, she stayed at the monastery. No social media, no unanswered messages, no one asking, "Are you okay?" and no one saying, "I'm sorry." Only morning tea with the master afternoons, sweeping leaves behind the temple, and walks of mindful steps around the quiet lotus lake beyond the mountain. She did not force herself to find answers. She simply began to observe the world outside and within herself. Layers of hurt emerged like cloth that had been damp for too long. She did not scold herself for loving the wrong person. She only felt sorrow for not having seen clearly. One afternoon, as they sat drinking tea by the veranda, Shara asked, "How can I know whether someone is a person to keep or a person to let go? Some people, they hurt me, but I still love them." The master did not answer right away. He slowly poured tea. Steam rose light as a wisp of memory. After a while, he said, "If you want to know whether water is poisonous, don't just look at its color. Drink it with an awakened mind." He looked straight into Shara's eyes, very calm. A toxic person does not always shout. They can be gentle and still wear you down day by day. Then he began to point out the signs, things Shara suddenly realized had happened again and again in her life. Yet she had always defended them because she thought it was love. They make you feel guilty whenever you don't do what they want. They control you but call it caring. They make you apologize even when you did nothing wrong. They are always the victim in their own story. They do not listen. They only wait to rebut. They lie, but use sincere eyes to cover it. They don't know dialogue. They only know manipulation. Shara sat still as a statue. Those words shone light into the dark places of her mind. She had seen it all, but she hadn't wanted to believe it. Out of love, out of hope, and out of fear of being alone. And the most dangerous thing, the master continued, is that they make you doubt your own felt sense. When you begin not to trust your intuition, that is when they have already taken your heart." Shara said nothing. But from that day on, she began to write again, not letters to the past lover, letters to herself, to the things she had kept silent about for years. She wrote about being manipulated without realizing it, about the times she pretended not to be sad, about the times she apologized just to keep someone even while knowing they were draining her life force. Each line was a layer peeled away. Each morning, meditation was a sitting with the pain she had always fled. Then one day, when they were walking mindfully along the lake, Shara stopped and looked at the water. "I'm not angry at them anymore," she said. "I'm only regretful. Regretful that I didn't trust my own feelings." The master nodded. Awakening is the first step of healing, but after awakening comes forgiveness for others and for yourself. Shara smiled. Not a forced smile, but a kind of ease. She no longer needed anyone to apologize. She did not need that person to return, because now she had returned to herself. How many times have you been in a relationship where the more you love, the more blind you become? How many times have you doubted your own feelings because the other person always had a way of making you feel you were too sensitive? Have you ever found yourself like Shara, carrying a heart full of wounds, yet forcing it to endure, out of fear of being alone? If so, remember, true love does not make you small. To love never means losing yourself. Master Hogi said, "When someone makes your heart feel strangled, that is not love. It is holding on out of fear." Awakening is not coldness. It is the courage to choose yourself, even if it means letting go of someone you deeply loved. Because only when you step out of where there is poison can you begin to breathe again. Shara turned to the master, her voice full of worry. "But isn't compassion about opening the heart, about unconditional forgiveness? If I start setting boundaries, if I withdraw from someone, does that mean I'm acting selfishly and ignorantly?" The master smiled gently. His eyes carried the tenderness of one who had walked through the darkest regions of the human heart. He did not answer immediately. He only poured more tea slowly, as if each drop were meditating. Then he spoke soft as falling leaves. "You are confusing compassion with naivety, enlightened love with the kind of leniency that harms yourself. The Buddha once taught, you yourself as much as anyone in the entire universe deserve your love and affection. You are also a sentient being, and you deserve protection and love no less than anyone." He told Shara an old story. Someone once asked the Buddha, "If a loved one keeps repeating harmful behavior, what should I do? Should I forgive forever?" And the Buddha did not teach unconditional forgiveness. He said, "A peaceful mind does not come from enduring, but from the wisdom to let go at the right time." The master looked straight into Shara's eyes. Compassion is not letting others comfortably trample your heart. True compassion is when you know to stop, so you do not keep helping the other person create karma with you. She was silent, as if for the first time truly hearing and believing these things. "There is a kind of distance," he continued, "called compassionate distance, a distance full of kindness. You step away not out of hatred, but to prevent both of you from continuing to harm each other. That is loving with wisdom, not with weakness." The next day, Shara and the master sat by the stream. The sound of water flowed softly, like nature's whisper. She spoke slowly, her voice full of feeling. "I used to think that silent endurance was noble, that if I didn't react, didn't say anything, I was being mature. But I stayed silent so long that I no longer recognized I was in pain. The pain piled up day by day until I became afraid of my own emotions. The master nodded, thoughtful. People often speak of forgiving others, but forget that sometimes we need to forgive ourselves for having let ourselves endure too long. He began to teach Shara how to listen to the body's silent language. If your heart races, if your breathing turns uneven, your throat tightens your chest, contracts, that is not oversensitivity, it is a message. Your body does not know how to lie. He taught her a simple practice, almost like a mindfulness exercise. Before each person you meet, spend 1 minute returning to your breath. Then write down your feelings in a notebook, no judging, just observing. And if after 3 meetings you consistently feel drained, doubtful of yourself, or dimmer in your own light, then perhaps you are near someone who makes your heart wither. You not only have the right to protect your heart, he said, you have the responsibility to do so. Your heart is a sacred home, and not everyone has the key to enter. One morning, Shara stood by the lake, the water reflecting her image like a quiet mirror. But unlike the day she arrived at the monastery, her eyes were different now, not weary but calmly clear. She turned to the master, bowed, and said softly, I will no longer apologize for choosing to protect myself. The master only smiled a satisfied smile, then turned back to sweeping the courtyard, as if nothing important had just happened. But something had truly happened within Shara, and perhaps within you. Maybe you too have been where she was loving someone to the point of losing your boundaries, believing endurance was kindness, mistaking silence for compassion. But the truth is, love cannot exist if it kills the safety in your soul. I am not telling you to cut ties. I am inviting you to do something very simple. Sit down, close your eyes, and ask yourself one question. Does this person lift the light in me or dim it? When you can honestly answer that question, you won't need anyone to tell you what to do next. Because true compassion never demands that you sacrifice yourself. And setting boundaries is sometimes the deepest love you can offer, both to the other person and to yourself. In the silence of that afternoon, Shara left the monastery not with a broken heart, but with a settled mind. And as in the seasons of life, when one door closes, another quietly opens. The next story will bring you back to the image of the Buddha, but this time in the midst of a battlefield where there is a soldier who wishes to kill, and a teaching from the Buddha that makes the sword fall from his hand. Along the great river in the late afternoon, the sunset cast the water red. Gentle ripples shimmered, reflecting, as if smoldering on the silvery armor of the man who had just reined in his horse. He dismounted his legs, weary after the long journey. Not because the road was too far, but because his heart, for a long time, had had nowhere to rest. His name was Varna, a soldier known throughout the region for bravery, for glorious feats on the battlefield. He had once faced an entire cavalry unit alone, had stood in the center of a siege without blinking, had swung his sword like a lightning blade in a stormy sky. In everyone's eyes, he was invincible, but no one knew that on some nights, Varna lay awake sweating in a fitful sleep because of screams no longer present in the world outside. His body was uninjured. The wound was deeper than that somewhere no sword could heal. He dreamed of blood, dreamed of pleading eyes, dreamed of an enemy who had already fallen, whom he still struck once more, not out of necessity, but because the habit of fighting had sunk so deep, it no longer needed to distinguish right from wrong. For 3 days, he had not held a sword. He simply walked, speaking to no one, telling no one, just walking toward the deep forest where it was said the Buddha was dwelling. He did not come to ask for more strength, nor to seek a new strategy. He had only one question that 1,000 victories had not answered. Why do I defeat everything outside? Yet inside I feel defeated. Varna knelt beneath a sala tree where the Buddha sat among silent people. No drums, no elaborate ceremony. Only the wind through the leaves and the quiet light spreading over the ground. Varna placed his sword behind his back. It was the first time he had left it behind both literally and figuratively. I am a soldier, he said, his voice trembling yet resolute. I have killed to protect, struck for honor. But the more I fight, the emptier my heart feels. I have gained everything fame, respect, yet cannot find peace. I am beginning to fear my own hands. Please show me, how do I find true strength? Strength that doesn't make me lose myself. The Buddha looked at Varna. His gaze held neither reproach nor pity, only the quiet of one who had seen too much of humanity's suffering. He asked, "In your last battle, who was the one you found hardest to face?" Varna lowered his head. His face tightened. "A soldier," he replied, "nameless." There was no hatred in his eyes, only a strange clarity, as if he understood me before I swung my sword. I killed him. But after that, I was no longer myself. I felt as if I had just cut a part of my own soul. A brief silence. Then the Buddha said, "One who can kill 100 men in battle is not necessarily strong, but one who can sit still in anger without being swept away by it, that is the one with true strength." Varna looked up. His eyes brightened a little, but were full of confusion. "But how do I not be angry? How do I not react when insulted, attacked? How do I not become weak if I don't strike back?" The Buddha bent down and picked up a dry leaf from the ground. He held it up for Varna to see. When it is green, a leaf trembles with every gust of wind, sensitive, easily hurt. But when it has dried, no matter how strong the wind blows, it lies there. Anger is the same. It can only nest in the part of the mind that is not yet mature. When you do not understand yourself, when the inner wounds are unhealed, you will be easily shaken by what is outside you. He paused, then gently said, "No one forbids you to feel anger, but you can learn not to act from it. Like a person sitting in a burning room, able to feel the heat, yet clear enough not to pour oil on the flames." Varna nodded. Tears did not fall, but something in his eyes had softened. Perhaps the anger, perhaps the doubt, perhaps the sense of loneliness within his own heart. The Buddha continued, "When you are angry, do not rush to respond. Breathe, sit down. Ask yourself, where did this anger come from? Sometimes it doesn't arise from the present at all, but from an old wound in the past, a feeling of betrayal, a time you were unseen. Only when you understand the root of anger will you no longer be its slave." Varna bowed very low, as if to touch his forehead to the ground. That afternoon, he asked for no mantra, needed no blessing. He simply stood and quietly returned, with no sword, no escort, only a new, unfamiliar calm in his eyes. Months later, People said they saw a man meditating in a village near the border every morning, sitting still amid the bustle of the early market, like a rock in a stream. Someone asked, "Were you once a warrior?" He simply smiled. "I used to think I was strong when I defeated others. Now I'm learning not to fight with myself." And what about you? Have you ever been like Varna, thinking you were winning, yet not understanding why you were still fractured inside? Have you ever braced yourself against the world until you no longer recognized yourself? If so, perhaps it's time to stop, not to keep fighting, but to listen. Perhaps what you need is not a new sword, but a deep enough breath to see the anger within you. Then gently lay it down. Because sometimes, true strength is not the ability to win, but the ability to no longer need to fight. That afternoon, under the Sala's broad shade, where the breeze blew like a wordless song, the Buddha sat among a circle of disciples and villagers. All were silent, as if waiting for something important to be spoken. The air felt suspended. Then, from his calm voice, a verse sounded. "The greatest victory is victory over oneself." Many think that is merely a beautiful metaphor, but the Buddha said nothing just to sound pleasing. It is a profound truth, a spiritual realization understood only by those who have looked straight into their own darkness. A warrior may rout an army, annihilate enemies, even erase a bloodline. But if he is driven by greed, anger, or delusion, then no matter how heroic he appears outwardly inside, he remains weak. Conversely, one who can recognize anger arising within and refuse to let it control him is truly courageous. For the enemy within is the hardest to face. It wears no armor, wields no sword, does not shout. It hides, it whispers, and if you are not mindful, you become your own victim. Varna, the warrior who had won dozens of battles, sat in a corner of the monastery, silent. He no longer wore iron armor or carried a sword. From the day he knelt before the Buddha, he had left his sword behind and never went back for it. The Buddha turned his gaze toward Varna as if speaking to him and to all those carrying a quiet war inside. He said Varna once thought courage was not fearing death, but true courage is not fearing to look into one's own mind. Silence. A short sentence that made those with a little meditative experience shiver, because it is so. You may climb mountains, cross deserts, charge into battle, but to sit still with yourself in the nakedness of emotion with unnamed unease. How many dare do that courage is when you do not deny the shadow, when you feel anger yet do not kill, when you feel hurt yet do not hurt others, when you accept every emotion yet do not become it. That is a quiet strength more enduring than any sword. Then the Buddha said again, "One who bears a sword easily harms others, but one who keeps a compassionate heart in the face of insult is protecting the whole world from a new war." If you hear this once, you might dismiss it as moral advice, but think again. When you're angry, if you shout, the other will reply. Two people spiral into a cycle where no one remembers why it began. A single uncontrolled word can have consequences that last a lifetime. But if you pause, if you breathe, if you choose not to react, you not only save yourself, you save the other from becoming a captive of their reflex. Mindfulness is not avoiding battle. It is knowing when to fight and for what. And if the most worthy battle is the anger within you, then that is the noblest war. After that teaching, Varna asked the Buddha for one thing. Please allow me to stay at the monastery. I no longer wish to learn how to win. I wish to learn how to stop fighting. From then on, the former warrior became a new student. He donned the saffron robe. He learned again from the beginning how to breathe, how to walk, how to sit still, how to observe the mind. On the first day, when someone accidentally spilled water on his robe, Varna flared up at once. His throat was ready to shout. Anger surged like an old reflex, but he stopped. He remembered the Buddha's words, "Breathe before you react." And he breathed. Just one breath, just one brief moment, but enough to change the course of action. The anger was still there, but it no longer controlled him. You may not be a warrior, but if you have ever burned with anger at being misunderstood, if you have reacted because you felt insulted, if you have argued just to prove you were right, then you and Varna are not different. You do not need to become a monk. Do not need to give up everything. Just begin with something very small. When angry, do not react immediately. Instead, observe. Place your hand on your chest. Feel your heart beating. And ask, what do I truly want to win or to be at peace? You have the right to be angry, but you also have the right not to let anger decide who you are. Each time you do this, you train a new kind of strength. Not the strength of muscle or words, but the strength of one who knows how to conquer himself. Years later, Varna was no longer called a warrior. People called him by another name, the one who listens to anger. He could sit beside an angry person without being affected, could hear someone pour out their bitterness and still keep peace. Because he no longer fought, he had understood that anger is just a child crying in the dark. It does not need to be defeated. It needs to be understood. Once a disciple asked him, "Master, why don't you get angry when they slander you?" Varna only smiled, "Because I know that if I respond, anger will gain another companion. Victory in silence, winning without fighting. That is the victory of the wise." And as evening fell, the Buddha gently said, "One who knows how to conquer himself today, tomorrow will have nothing to fear. In today's world of constant struggle, you may never have fought anyone, yet you are still battling each day with emotions, with pressure, with yourself. If so, then you are a warrior. And the most worthy battle always begins in the heart. Therefore, begin with a single breath. The story of Hiroto and Master Noro will show you that there are pains no one else can untie for you. You are the one who must loosen that knot. Let us continue. It was just the beginning of autumn. A fine mist, like a silk scarf draped over the ancient temple roofs, making the scene blur like an unfinished ink painting. The first yellow leaves of the season fell quietly onto the stone veranda. No sound, no display. Only the wind slipping through the pines and the whisper of the stream as if retelling something from long ago. In the garden behind the Zen monastery, where every rock and branch seemed placed with silent reverence, a young man sat motionless beneath an old pine. His name was Hiroto, only 27, yet his eyes bore the heaviness of someone who had carried too many responsibilities. A reserved figure, careful and full of love. But that very love was what had thrown his heart into turmoil. Hiroto sat a long time, his eyes gazing far off as if searching for something out of reach. All of him was a field of stillness, but inside waves were surging. He had been the family's pillar, since his father died young. As the eldest of three, Hiroto learned to shoulder burdens early, taking part-time jobs to pay tuition, standing in for his father to take his siblings to school, comforting his mother when she cried silently at night. But the hardest thing he learned was not how to provide for others. It was how to stand on the sidelines while someone he loved had to walk their own path. His younger sister, Haruka, was bright and sensitive, but had gone through a long period of depression. For Haruka, the entrance exam for psychology wasn't just about passing or failing. It was an inner battle to prove she wasn't weak, that she could step into life with confidence, that she had emerged from the darkness of earlier days. Hiroto understood that, and precisely because he did, he wanted even more to do something to protect her. Each night after Haruka fell asleep, he sat at her desk, quietly summarizing lectures, rewriting key points, even drafting outlines based on the syllabus. He thought if he could help her start smoothly, she could walk the rest on her own. It was sincere love, seeking nothing but safety for a loved one. But good intentions sometimes lose their way. Haruka said nothing when she discovered materials she hadn't made. She went to take the exam in silence and stayed silent when the results came. No joy, no pride, just refusing the reward and withdrawing from her relationship with her brother. On a blustery afternoon, she left him a short line, "I want to get through this on my own, whatever the outcome." That was all. But to Hiroto, it felt like a cut. Someone who only wanted to help ended up being seen as interfering. Someone full of love became the reason for a rift. Inside him was a tangle, pain, anger, hurt pride, and a sadness he couldn't name. And so he went to the monastery, hoping to see his heart more clearly. When a Zen master asked, Hiroto said very little, but each sentence seemed long compressed. "I only wanted to help my sister, but it seems I helped the wrong way. Why do good intentions drive people away? Why is it that when I try to protect, it's seen as causing harm? Is there something wrong in my love?" It wasn't only Hiroto's question. It's the question of many kind-hearted people, those who have been hurt by their own goodness. They give, but nothing is returned. They worry, but are called controlling. They help, but are seen as disrespecting others. And like every seed in the soil, each mind needs time and space to sprout on its own. If we force too soon, intervene too deeply, sometimes what we break is precisely the necessary journey of that person. After a quiet pause, the monastery's Zen master told Hiroto an old story. Long ago, a child pitied a butterfly struggling inside its cocoon. He thought, if I cut the cocoon, the butterfly will suffer less and be free sooner. He took scissors and carefully slit a small opening. Indeed, the butterfly emerged, but what the child didn't know was that a butterfly's wings must struggle inside the cocoon to fill with blood and gain enough strength for its first flight. That butterfly, though rescued, could only crawl on the ground for life. It never learned to fly. Hiroto bowed his head. A simple story, but it touched the deepest place in his heart. He understood helping is not always good if we don't understand the natural law of growth. Pain has its reasons, and another's struggle is sometimes not to be rescued, but to forge their own wings. A seed out of season cannot sprout no matter how rich the soil or abundant the water. If we grow impatient and dig it up to check what we receive, is only the ruin of what we wanted to protect. Tea ended. Hiroto remained in the rock garden a long time, watching leaves fall. No one said anything more, but when he stood up, his eyes had changed, no longer confused, but accepting an acceptance that wasn't resignation, but an understanding that sometimes love must know how to step back, to trust that the one you love can walk on their own, to accept that their journey will have pain collapse and times that do not need your presence. And that very thing is perhaps the greatest gift we can offer, not doing in their place, but trusting they can grow on their own. If you are reading this, perhaps you've been Hiroto, trying so hard. You did things for someone else, confusing love with control, quietly preparing everything for fear a loved one would stumble. But remember, mature love is love that knows how to step back, to stand at the edge, not interfering yet, always there if the other turns back to find you. Like the sky that is always there, never intruding on a bird's flight, but still the place it can return to. Do you have the courage to love by standing still, not saving, not fixing, not replacing, just quietly trusting? You probably already know the answer. You may just need time to truly live it. There is a quiet truth in love that when you truly love someone, your first instinct is to protect, shield, clear the path, block every storm, even the smallest one. And that seems so natural. If you've ever been a parent, an older sibling, or a lover, you know it like breathing. No need to learn, no need to try. The instant you see your loved one hurting, you want to do something, immediately. But then, at some point in life, you realize love does not mean doing it for them. It is a quiet awakening without fanfare when you watch someone you love refuse your help, when someone turns away, even as you offer your best, when your kindness isn't received, not because they are ungrateful, but because they need to walk their own road. And when that happens, you start to feel lost. You ask, can love itself cause hurt? Can goodness given the wrong way become a burden? True compassion does not lie in doing it for them. The Buddha once taught, no one can save anyone. No one can, and no one should. Each person must walk their own path. That teaching sounds paradoxical to a loving heart, if not to save what is loved for. But that is the essence of true compassion in Buddhism. The heart of kindness is not an intervention, but an unconditional presence, in the fact that you are there neither abandoning nor indifferent, yet not stepping in to take their place, not taking away the opportunity they need to grow. Someone once asked a Zen master, then where is compassion, if not in helping? The master smiled. Compassion is not in the hands, but in the heart. Your hands may act, but your heart must know when to act. Sometimes stepping back is the most compassionate act. Compassion is not control. Sometimes we want our loved one to be happy so much, we forget they have the right to be wrong, the right to fall. And sometimes they need those very wounds to find their true strength. Remember this image, a seedling. If you pull it from the soil and place it in the light, it will die, even if you think you're helping it sprout faster. Because what it needs is not immediate light, but the struggle in darkness to break through at the right time. Do you see yourself in that? Sometimes withdrawing is love. It sounds contradictory, but think back to someone you once loved, someone you did everything for, and then at some point you realized it was the quiet presence, no pushing, no fixing, that healed the relationship. In crisis, everyone needs space to find who they are. If you stand too close, you block the light they need to see the way out. The Zen master looked at Hiroto, the young man carrying both ache and sincerity. "Do you still love your sister?" he asked. He nodded, eyes reddening. No more anger, no more resistance, only a softened sadness. Then, the master said, "Let her walk her own road. Don't cut in, don't lead, just walk alongside when invited." And the miracle begins with that letting go. No long sermon, no justification, only a moment of awakening that love is not always doing but knowing when to stop. The next morning, Hiroto returned to the meditation hall. Few words, he simply sat a long time. When making tea, his hands no longer trembled as before. He asked no more. He didn't pour out his heart. But clearly something had changed within him, deep and steady. And you? Is someone in your life going through a difficult time? Are you trying to help by giving advice, doing things for them, or clearing the way so they suffer less? If so, pause a moment. Breathe. Ask yourself, do they need me, or do they need space to find themselves? Practice presence without imposing. Learn to listen without fixing. Trust in your loved one's capacity to get through. Because when you step back one step, you open a door for them to step forward on their own 2 feet. And when they do, you're not just witnessing growth, you are helping create it through quiet, wordless trust. The ending is not a refusal. It is an invitation to return. The day Hiroto left the monastery, he no longer asked, "Why does goodness cause harm?" He only said, "I've understood that love is not always doing something. Sometimes love is simply staying still, trusting that the other can weather their own storms." And you know what? In the years that followed, Hiroto was not only no longer saddened by being turned away, he gradually became a better listener. He began working in community education, a place where people didn't need him to fix things but to accompany them. No one asked him to summarize lessons or carry others' emotions. They only needed him to be present. And that's how he brought the teaching into life, not through sermons, not through scriptures, but through unconditional presence without demanding outcomes. And now, before we leave this story, I want to ask you one thing. Is there someone in your life who needs quiet presence instead of intervention? Think of that person. It could be your partner. It could be your child. It could be a friend who is stuck. Or yourself, waiting for yourself to let go a little. If you're ready, we'll step into the next story. The Buddha and the Thief Light does not refuse darkness. A story about unconditional compassion, not reserved for the good, but also for those who have done wrong. Because there are hearts that cannot be changed by argument, but soften before a light without judgment. A crescent moon hung over the far mountainside as if it were the last sliver of light before night fully fell. The forest on the edge of the ancient city had begun to grow quiet. Only the murmur of insects through the leaves remained, and light gusts moved past like gentle touches of memory. In a small clearing in the woods, a group of people had gathered not to perform a ritual or hold some grand event, but simply to sit and listen to someone speaking. No microphone, no stage. Only a small oil lamp and a calm face in the circle, the Buddha. He did not stand. He did not give a performance. He simply sat, eyes deep like a still lake voice, light as the morning breeze. But behind the bamboo trunks in the thick darkness, someone else was there, silent, withdrawn, yet unable to leave. His name was Raga. Raga had not come for enlightenment. He came for another reason, the same reason he had always clung to his whole life. He had never found a place to belong. A thief, a man who lived by taking what was not his raga, was long accustomed to the dark. At night he moved like a shadow. Inside he was as mute as stone. Perhaps the only thing that drew him here was a rumor passed from mouth to mouth. There is someone teaching about forgiveness, about a light that does not reject darkness. Hearing that the heart that felt dead in Raga's chest gave a start. One heartbeat not strong, but enough to pull his feet here. He did not sit in the circle. He stood behind the bamboo. In his hand was the familiar knife, not because he meant to harm anyone, but because he didn't know how to put it down. The knife felt like his identity, the one thing that had never betrayed him, or at least the thing that always made others fear him, and he needed that to keep from being judged. In Raga's heart was a question he had never dared to speak aloud, had not even dared to think through completely. Can someone like me change? It was not only Raga's question. It is the question of anyone who has done wrong, stumbled, hurt others, and then sentenced themselves. Can one change? Or once you step into darkness, will light never return? The Buddha's voice rose not loud, not trying to draw attention, yet it made everyone listen. Sunlight does not reject the one lost in the dark. A stream does not reject dirty hands. And a compassionate heart does not reject anyone, no matter who they are or what they have done. Everyone was silent. Someone gave a slight nod. Someone wiped away tears. But behind the bamboo, Raga felt as if someone had gripped his shoulder. Who was he talking to? Could it be me? His heart pounded. The knife in his hand felt heavier than ever. Sweat began to bead in his palms. He stepped back half a pace, then stopped. Something not clear held him there. Part of him wanted to run. Another part no longer did. The Buddha continued, his eyes looking straight into the darkness, without fear, without doubt. There is someone sitting in the dark. He thinks he belongs there, but darkness is not his nature. He does not yet know that he himself is light that has been forgotten. He did not call a name. Yet each word felt written across Raga's chest. No one is beyond change. However dark the past, a person can still return to the light, if he dares to recognize that the light never left him. And then the knife fell. There was no loud sound, but in Raga's heart, it was the greatest shatter of his life. He stepped out of the darkness, not creeping, not with head held high. He simply walked like someone who had gone very far for a very long time and was now tired. He did not speak. No one asked. Raga simply knelt before the Buddha, not like a criminal, but like a lost child who had finally found home. The Buddha did not look at him with pity. He did not ask, "What have you done?" He only placed his hand toward the ground and said, "Sit. Close your eyes. Do you hear your breath?" Raga closed his eyes. He listened. The breath was not full, not steady, but it was the breath of a human being, not of a role. For the first time in years, he felt real, he felt human. That night, Raga did not receive a sermon. He was not forced to repent nor to swear to start life over. He was simply invited to sit still, to breathe, and to remember that inside him, life still remained. That was the night Raga was reborn, not by baptism, not by erasing guilt, but by a simple question. Do you hear your breath? From that day, no one saw Raga stealing again. He lived quietly in the village, helping an old farmer. He did not try to become a good person. He simply lived sincerely, and listened to his breath every morning. Perhaps you are not raga. Perhaps you have never stolen, never lived in darkness. But if you have ever felt guilty about something in your past, if you have ever doubted that you are unworthy of changing, of being loved, of starting again, remember, light does not require you to be perfect. It only asks you to return. And do you know where to begin? With the very first breath you notice in awareness. Raga's story is not just a snippet about personal transformation. It is a mirror for all of us, those who have stood at the edge, who have erred, who have looked at themselves in the mirror and asked, "Am I still worthy of anything good?" Perhaps you have never held a knife like Raga. But be honest, how many times have you held thoughts as sharp as knives to wound yourself? The hard words you speak in your head. I'm awful. I'll never change. I don't deserve anyone's forgiveness. That is also a knife. And perhaps you have held it so long, you've forgotten your hand is bleeding. The Buddha once taught, "There is no path that leads to the light, you are the light." That saying is not just conceptual. It is an awakening. We often look for light outside someone's approval, being loved the right way, some lucky moment. But we forget the light is already within. The problem is, we don't believe we deserve to switch it on. I want to say this clearly, and without circling around, no one is born irredeemably bad. No one is a born villain. There are only wounded souls not yet healed. In Buddhist teaching, karma is not an irrevocable sentence. It does not say, because you did wrong, you will always be wrong. Karma is a current of learning. It is like a river. If you keep swimming the same way, you'll head out to sea. But if you learn to turn back, you can still reach the shore. Every action, every thought, every choice is a seed. You may have sown bad seeds, but the soil of the heart does not grow only poison. If tended with mindfulness, with forgiveness, with meaningful action, then wholesome seeds can sprout, and the harmful ones will naturally fade. Remember the image of Raga letting go of the knife. That was not a weak gesture. It was courage. Letting go of the knife means letting go of the self you used to defend yourself, letting go of the identity that made you feel you existed, letting go of aggression, fear, and shame. It is the act of someone willing to face the truth. I am tired enough of the dark. I want the light, even just a ray. And the light, as the Buddha taught, does not demand you be good enough, does not make you confess, does not ask for a reform contract. It only invites you to sit down, to breathe, and to realize you are still alive. And being alive means you can begin again. I want to ask you, the one listening to me, do you believe in your own capacity to awaken, or are you still carrying a self-written sentence? Because I once did wrong, I no longer deserve. If you doubt yourself, I invite you to do one small thing. Place your hand on your chest. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath in, and exhale very slowly. In that moment, without any other reason, whisper, "I can still begin again." Perhaps no one will hear you say it. Perhaps no one will believe you have changed. But you are not doing this for them. You are doing it for yourself. Because the light within you does not need an audience's applause. It only needs you to look at it. And if there is someone in your life who is lost, who is acting poorly, who is suffering because of their mistakes, remember, compassion does not mean covering up for them, but compassion is not condemning them forever. Be like the Buddha. Stand firm in your light. Do not rescue. Do not force. Do not control. Simply be present, warm enough, real enough, so that when they are ready, they can find their way home. Compassion can be a gentle word while someone is rebelling. Compassion can also be steady silence when they are not ready to change. Compassion is not saving them. It is believing they can save themselves. Remember, your light is not only to shine for others, it is also to illumine the path you are walking. After that fateful night, Raga did not become a saint. He did not transform into a sage, but each day he sat under the tree where the Buddha had sat and practiced breathing. He gathered leaves, swept the courtyard, learned to live again, not as a former thief, but as a human being in healing. People gradually forgot who he had been, but Raga remembered. And because he remembered, he lived each day like an apology, not with words, but with deeds. Transformation does not need to be grand. Sometimes it only requires that you breathe again, truly breathe, and light the lamp within. Darkness has no real form. It is only the absence of light. And Raga's story in truth is not just for telling. It is to remind you that every soul can return, including you. And now I invite you to continue with me to the next story. Along the moss-soft stone path leading into the ancient monastery, morning sunlight filtered through the sala canopy and fell upon quietly drifting petals. The air carried the scent of ripe fruit mingled with dew still resting on the leaves. Forest birdsong rose like a waking melody that slowed every footstep. It was as if nature were whispering something that sometimes what you need isn't to move faster, but to pause and listen. People called that path the Way of Awakening. Not because there was anything overtly sacred about it, but because anyone who had walked it left behind some portion of their reflections. Those who had been hurt, who had been angry, who carried unhealed wounds. They passed by in silence, but their hearts spoke. Among them was a man named Karan. Karan was not a bad person. In fact, if you had asked the people of Rajagaha at the time, many would have said he was one of the region's most successful and generous merchants. He owned a large shop, employed many workers, and was known as a leader in the trade of offerings for worship. But like many powerful people, Karan had a very human flaw. He angered easily and found it hard to forgive. And that very trait made him the protagonist of a story, still retold to this day. It began when the Buddha started teaching in Rajagaha. People heard his teachings on restraint, letting go of superstition, and living simply. And their lifestyles gradually changed. They no longer bought extravagant offerings, no longer performed elaborate rites, no longer believed money could buy good fortune. To Karan, this was unacceptable. Each discourse felt like a blade slicing through his profits. In his eyes, the Buddha was ruining his livelihood. Karan's anger didn't erupt at once. It built up, coin by coin, lost. Whispers from regular customers who didn't return. Each time he watched the monk's alms procession pass through the market street, while no one spared a glance for his stall anymore. Anger hardened into hatred. Then one morning, as the market was just assembling people lighting stoves, setting out wares, bundling vegetables, Karan saw the saffron-robed monks passing by. Soft light reflected on their robes like a stream flowing through the marketplace. At their head was the Buddha, his gaze unsullied by dust, his footsteps so light they seemed not to touch the ground. Something flared in Karan at that instant, perhaps envy, perhaps the deep injury of challenged power, and he stepped forward. No greeting, no warning. He spat straight into the Buddha's face. The crowded market seemed to freeze. Such a crude act done to someone everyone revered. Many held their breath. Some raised hands to their mouths. A few old women wept not from fear, but from the wordless sight of injustice. The younger monks stood still. A few moved to step forward, but were stopped by the Buddha's gentle gaze. No resistance, no rebuke, only stillness. The Buddha wiped his face with his sleeve, then turned to look at Quran. That gaze, so the story goes, was clear, like a lake just stilled after rain. No trace of fury, no ripple of hurt, only a total peace that for an instant stalled even Quran's rage. Then the Buddha spoke. His voice was not loud, not forceful, just a breeze brushing the ear. If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong? Quran was stunned. He was not used to being questioned, especially after he had just struck first. I do not accept your gift. So that gift still belongs to you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to practice patience and compassion today. Silence blanketed the market. Vendors bowed their heads. Children hid behind their mothers. And Quran, a man used to giving orders, suddenly didn't know what to say. His heart, braced to be hard for so many years, now heard a strange sound, the quiet of his own conscience. No one knew what he thought that night. Only that the next morning, when the monks' alms procession passed the market again, Quran was already waiting. In his hands were a basin of water and a new cloth. As the Buddha approached, he bowed and spoke softly. Yesterday I gave a terrible gift. Today I want to offer a different one if you will accept it. The Buddha said little. He simply smiled and bowed his head. They say that after that day, Quran did not become a monk, but he changed. His shop still sold ritual items, but no longer encouraged superstition. He began using his profits to build wells and open a school for children in the area. And the strangest thing, he often retold his own story, and each time he finished with a light smile. In truth, I never insulted the Buddha. I only gave him the gift I already carried in my heart. Unfortunately, it reeked of anger. That story is not merely about a wealthy man and a serene teacher. It is the story of anyone who has ever lashed out because their wounds were not yet seen. It is a reminder to those who have held anger in their hearts only to realize years later that the one who suffered most was themselves. It is an invitation to look at a simple question. Is there an angry gift you once gave that the other person did not accept? And if that gift still sits within you, are you willing to set it down? Because forgiveness is not something you do for the other person. Forgiveness is what you do to stop your own wound from bleeding after too long. And sometimes, forgiveness doesn't come from a decision, but from the moment you behold peace on the face of someone who does not react. Remember, light does not arrive after you've repaid every debt. Light arrives when you stop creating more darkness. The story from Rajagaha still echoes today, not because of the violence of a spit, but because of the silence that dissolved everything. That silence is present within you too if you turn back and touch it. And if today someone has hurt you, what gift will you give them? On the road of life, all of us are at times hurt, misunderstood, betrayed. Many carry those memories in their hearts like a heavy stone. They think, I will never forgive. They believe forgiveness means admitting weakness or allowing the other to keep hurting them. But Buddhism sees forgiveness through a completely different lens. Forgiveness, first of all, is not a favor you grant. It is not the proclamation, "I am magnanimous, I pardon you." Forgiveness is returning freedom to yourself, refusing to carry your pain one more day. The Buddha once used an image that still makes anyone who hears it pause and reflect. He said, "Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned first." In the West, people call this self-inflicted pain. In Buddhism, anger is regarded as a real kind of energy. When we hold on to it, we allow it to burn our nervous system, our heart, and our character. Forgiveness, therefore, does not give anything to the other person. It frees us from the fire that is burning us. When the Buddha said to Quran, "I do not accept that gift," he was not being poetic. He literally refused to let the energy of anger enter his consciousness. He saw clearly that anger is only an expression, not the person's essence. Behind the crudity, there may still be a dormant seed of awakening. By refusing to accept the gift, he taught us, you cannot stop others from throwing, but you can choose not to catch. In Buddhist teaching, forgiveness is neither agreement with wrongdoing, nor amnesia, nor a fake reconciliation. Forgiveness is the process of releasing resentment from your heart because you deserve peace. No one deserves to haul a painful memory for a lifetime, waiting for an apology that may never come. Holding a hot coal does not burn the other person, it only burns you. Let go not because they deserve it, but because you are tired. You may think, but I'm not the Buddha. I can't stay serene like him when insulted. True. You are not the Buddha. You are a human being with genuine emotions. But precisely because you are human, you can learn to transform suffering. Forgiveness is not an overnight event. It is a process. Sometimes it lasts for years. Sometimes you think you've let go, and when old winds blow, your heart aches again. That's okay. It's part of healing. You can start with the smallest step. Recognize the hot coal in your heart. Name it. Who hurt you? What keeps you tossing at night? Write it down or sit quietly under a tree and whisper to yourself, I don't want to hold this coal anymore. Don't pretend to be a saint. Don't force a smile. Just recognize. Just breathe. Whenever your heart surges, ask, do I really need to carry this wound forever? If repeated long enough, that question becomes your deepest prayer for freedom. You don't have to let go all at once. Forgiveness is a practice, like training a muscle. You lift a little, release a little, and strength gradually forms. Each time you don't react in the old way, you win an inner battle. Looking at Quran's story, two things are clear. First, letting go is not weakness. Dropping the blade, the word, the grudge, does not make you a coward. It makes you brave enough to face yourself. Second light is unconditional. The Buddha did not demand that Quran confess or repent before sitting down. He simply invited him back to the breath right then. Wisdom's light does not reject darkness because darkness is only the absence of light. When you light your mind, darkness disappears on its own. That is why forgiveness in Buddhism is not only forgiving others, but also forgiving yourself. Some people punish themselves for a lifetime over a past mistake. They don't realize that self-punishment is the very coal they are clutching. They say, I deserve to suffer and keep burning. But if you cannot forgive yourself, How can you truly let go of the past? Self-forgiveness is also an act of compassion. You can try a small practice right now. Place your hand on your chest. Close your eyes. Inhale deeply. Exhale very slowly. And say quietly, I can still begin again. Treat this as a promise to yourself, not to erase everything, but to allow yourself to go on without being shackled by what has passed. If someone in your life is lost, don't rush to judge them. But don't enable them either. Do as the Buddha did, stand firm in your own light, so that when they are ready, they can find the way back. Compassion does not mean sheltering every bad act. Compassion means believing in the other's capacity to change and creating a safe space for that change to sprout. Don't do it for them. Don't drag. Don't rescue by force. Rescue by presence and wisdom. You may ask, if I forgive, am I saying their behavior is acceptable? The answer is no. Forgiveness is not legitimizing wrongdoing. Forgiveness is refusing to let that wrongdoing keep running your life. It is a way to protect yourself while opening a chance for the other person if they wish to change as well. After that day, Quran was no longer the same man. He didn't become a saint overnight, but each day he sat under the tree where the Buddha had sat and practiced breathing. People saw someone who had once spread fear become the one sweeping the temple courtyard. No more bitterness, no more bluster, just an ordinary person learning to let go. That story is not to praise Quran. It is to remind us that every soul can return. There is no road leading to the light. You are the light. And the moment you set down the hot coal in your hand, you create space to receive a lotus. So before this story closes, ask yourself, is there someone in your life who throws coals? Have you ever been that person to someone else? And if today you set that coal down, not because they deserve it, but because you choose peace and light, might tomorrow feel lighter? The answer may not come right away, but simply asking the question is already a first step on the way home. Rest a bit, settle, and then, when your breath touches the bottom of your lungs, you will realize forgiveness is not a destination, but each gentle breath you give yourself. Whenever you let down a little hatred, a little anger, and a little of the hot coal still smoldering in your heart. As night's light slowly spreads and your mind grows quieter than ever, I know you may be carrying many things. Perhaps a pain without a name, a memory still scratching inside, a silent question no one has answered. But you are here listening fully to this journey, and that is the first step of healing. Forgiveness is not easy, but you have allowed your heart to open to listen to each story and each teaching like droplets gently soaking into a parched inner ground. Even a little is enough for transformation to begin. Sometimes a single drop of understanding can soothe an ocean of anger that has lived within us for a very long time. I am grateful to you for choosing to stay until the end. Thank you for walking with me through each story, each layer of teaching, each quiet moment. In a noisy world, the time you devote to silence like this is a sacred act. If what you've just heard has brought you a ray of light, a bit of peace, or simply one deeper breath, please share it. Press like to help spread this stillness to more people. Subscribe to Buddhism Seeds to continue traveling this path together, the path of returning to yourself. And if there's anything you want to share, an impression, a question, a story from your life, I invite you to leave a comment below. Each of your shares is a small candle, helping to light the way for others. Now, as you slip into sleep, know that you are not alone. An ancient wisdom walks with you, not condemning, not demanding, gently reminding you that you deserve peace. May you have a peaceful night, a deep sleep, and a light spirit. See you again on the journeys ahead. Good night.